Headlines this hour as South Africans wait with bated breath for President Cyril Ramaphosa to announce his new cabinet. More parties are joining the ANC-led Government of National Unity. Rise Mzansi is the latest to join the GNU. The Electoral Court has issued out directives in the MK Party's bid to invalidate the 2024 national and provincial elections. Good afternoon, it's just after midday on Saturday, the 22nd of June. Welcome to Week in Review live from our studio in Johannesburg. Here we review some of the biggest stories of the past week. I am Gustav Freiling and we invite you to give us a call if you'd like to comment or participate in a discussion. Our studio number is 011 714 0680, 0681 or 0682. Now, Rise Mzansi is the most recent party to join the Government of National Unity. The party's National Leadership Collective last night took the decision to participate in the GNU, bringing the number of parties to 9. The party says it has been consulting with various political parties over the last 2 weeks on how to best proceed in terms of power sharing and governance. Leader Songezo Zibi says that the party's manifesto and organizational principles align with the priorities and principles of the GNU, a statement of intent, which include upholding the Constitution, protecting the independence of key institutions and ensuring service delivery.
Government is not just the executive, because many South Africans and political pundits tend to talk about the executive only. Parliament is governing. The quality of legislation matters. The quality of oversight in committees matters. And holding the executive and other public agencies to account is part of government. So our focus at this point is maybe three things. First, to make sure that we uphold our constitutional values, because they are under threat at the moment. There are political organizations and other formations that are saying ditch the Constitution and destroy institutions. That's number one. Number two, we campaigned on an agenda of making sure that some very basic issues that hardly get attention in politics do get that attention. We intend to raise the issues of hunger and food security. We intend to raise the issues of really critical lack of access to water, especially in rural communities. We also intend to raise the issue of the pandemic of drug abuse that is destroying the lives of young people. And finally, spatial justice and land justice and spatial planning, so that we don't have millions of South Africans having to become illegal occupants of land because the government and parliament fail to provide the framework for them to have land and to build a home and to build a life. So those are some of the things that we are going to contribute in a national dialogue and any structure that is working on similar issues.
The United Democratic Movement has also joined the Government of National Unity, and this has now further increased the list of political parties that will form the GNU to 9 at this moment. The UDM announced it had accepted the ANC's proposal yesterday. The party leader, Bantu Holomisa, shared a letter that was sent to the ANC Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, detailing their response.
The United Democratic Movement has been in the vanguard of calling for GNU and coalition akin economic codessa for ages. Not a single political party is going to lecture us on that. What we wanted at the time, since there was no speaker, and that President Cyril Ramaphosa was announcing that GNU policy as the leader of the ANC, not the state. Now that there is a speaker, there's a president, we are ready to interpret the decision of the voters, being that let the power be shared among political parties. And the agreement which was signed by DA and ANC and IFP, that is between ANC and those parties. We are still yet to develop a proper agreement and rules and regulations where everyone will sign And I'm sure even those who are outside will join them. But for now, we are happy that we will be part and parcel of drafting those rules and regulations.
Now, Parliament needs to relook its rules as well as ethics more carefully. That's according to Professor Nania Bowler-Muller, Divisional Executive at the Human Sciences Research Council. And this as Dr. John Hlophe, who was impeached as the Western Cape Judge President, became the designated leader for the Mkhonto weSizwe Party in Parliament.
As far as we know, he hasn't got a criminal record. He's been impeached. And I don't think there are any rules about this. And also there's a precedent that's been set because our former public prosecutor was impeached by Parliament and then she became a member of Parliament for the EFF. So I think Parliament will have to look at its rules a little bit more carefully. Because besides laws and rules, you also have to look at ethics in public office. And it is rather disturbing, I think, to have someone who was impeached only in February of this year coming back to the same Parliament that impeached him. And one wonders about the kinds of conflicts of interest that would arise in such cases. It certainly doesn't look good. I mean, if you think about it, in 2008, the reason why there was a complaint lodged against Judge Hlophe was that he was trying to influence the Constitutional Court to make a judgment in favor of the then Deputy President, Jacob Zuma. So you can already see that there's a connection there and that connection continues. So that controversy remains in our minds. And one wonders about, yes, trust, public trust in institutions. Our research has shown that over the last 20 years, trust in democracy and democratic institutions, including Parliament, has dropped substantially. The courts have held relatively firm, but at the same time, trust in the courts has dropped from 58% in 2004 to 31% now. So we have a bit of a crisis of trust in institutions. And when something like this happens, I mean, then people would look at it and go, well, what kind of people are representing us in these institutions?
Right, the Electoral Court has issued out directives in the MK Party's bid to invalidate the 2024 national and provincial elections. The Specialist Court has given respondents until this coming Tuesday to file responding affidavits. And in addition, the applicant, the MK Party, will have until Thursday then next week to file a replying affidavit. The court further noted that it has the right to dispose of this matter on the papers without referral to an oral hearing. Now, these directives come after the MK Party filed papers earlier this month seeking an order declaring that the elections were not free and fair and therefore invalid. The party also seeks, among other things, an order from the court directing the president to call for a new national election to be held. Now, in papers seen by SABC News, the party contends that had the elections been conducted in a free and fair manner, the MK Party would in all likelihood have won the May polls. Now, the Electoral Commission says it's aware of the arrest of one of its commissioners, Dr. Nomsa Masuku, and says it will monitor developments in this matter. Dr. Masuku was arrested yesterday by the Hawks in relation to fraud charges amounting to 1.2 million rand. Masuku allegedly flouted processes when she was the head of Standard Bank's CSI program by awarding scholarships to those close to her. There are also claims that she deposited some of the money into her personal bank account without the knowledge and approval of the Trust's committee. She was granted 20,000 rand bail by the Specialised Commercial Crimes Court sitting in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. Her matter has been postponed to the 4th of September. Welcome back. Now, Cyril Ramaphosa was officially sworn in as South Africa's president at the Union Buildings in Pretoria earlier this week. under the theme 30 Years of Democracy, Partnership and Growth. Ramaphosa will now lead South Africa's 7th administration since the dawn of democracy. This follows the general elections held on the 29th of May. Now, this administration is a milestone for South Africa with the formation of the Government of National Unity that includes a number of other political parties. Today, we unpack what transpired at the event as well as expectations in the years ahead of this administration. To talk about this, we are now joined by the political analyst, Dr. Levi Ndo, and he's joining us this afternoon. Dr. Ndo, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon to you, Gustav. Good afternoon to the viewers at home. Thank you for having me.
Firstly, let me ask you, what did you make of Ramaphosa's speech? Because some said it was just a regurgitation of his previous speeches.
Well, what I picked up from the speech was that the president was making a commitment to South Africans that the new era has come and things are going to happen in a different way. He also used his speech to accept the election results and also to acknowledge that South African voters have compelled the different political parties to work together, and they should be able to find ways and means to be able to work together. At the same time, he identified the major challenges that are facing South Africa, and he put an emphasis on those that are going to join him in the administration to be more committed to the challenges facing South Africa, and he wanted to indicate that he is ready for any challenge, and indeed, South Africans should expect change.
So in this speech, President Ramaphosa said, and I quote him, "The formation of a government of national unity is a moment of profound significance. It is the beginning of a new era." Would you agree with that? Is this now the beginning of the new era? Are all these political parties used to the idea of working together?
Well, whether we like it or not, this is the beginning of the new era. But what we need to emphasize is that because these politicians have been forced to sit down and work together, what we need to get from them is commitment. What we need to get from them is that they should not have hidden agendas. What we need from our politicians is that they should put citizens first. And what we really need from them is that there should be rapid change in South Africa. They know the challenges that we face as South Africans, and what they need to do is to rise above everything else and learn to work together, exercise the highest degree of political maturity, and move South Africa forward.
Right now, Ramaphosa also in this speech called out those he said seek to divide and detract, and those who seek to inflame the tensions, saying they will not succeed. Who was this message directed to, according to you?
I think firstly, we need to acknowledge the fact that whether they differ as political parties and their leaders, they are now in a situation where they are supposed to work together. In these elections, we have had other political parties, the MK party, and other leaders of other political parties saying that the election could have been rigged. Others are also calling for a recount or having other elections. At the same time, there are those who are also talking about taking the matter even outside the borders of the country to nullify these elections. I think it could be referring to such. And of course, when you have a situation where some people would not be happy and make statements about the rigging of elections, you have a situation where gradually the country and its citizens could get divided. And I think that President Ramaphosa could be referring to such sentiments.
So the elections provide a chance now to evaluate the achievements of the outgoing administration and identify the top goals for the one that will now take over. What do you think are the immediate priorities for this incoming administration, this government of national unity? What are the expectations? And I suppose it can't just be the normal ANC business now.
the most easiest thing, in my view, that this administration has to deal with is to identify its priorities. And I'll tell you why. The manifestos of the different political parties and through their campaigns, they've been talking about same issues. All these political parties were talking about job creation. They were talking about quality education. They were talking about health. They were talking about housing. They were talking about electricity. This is the right opportunity for these leaders to sit down together under the umbrella of the GNU and develop a joint program. My sense is that because now they have agreed, the majority of them, to be in the government of national unity, knowing these challenges, this is the right opportunity for them to bring all these heads together and be able to provide the well-needed solutions to these challenges. And there is no better chance like this one. All the ideas that they have should be exposed. They should be able to have a clear direction. And indeed, South Africa can be a much better place to live in.
Right, Dr. Ndoh, we now have a caller on the line. His name is Jacob in Limpopo. Jacob, good afternoon. What is your question or comment on this discussion?
Yes, I think my comment is that I think it's a good thing of the government of national unity because there will be accountability. I think it will also reduce the corruption that was happening in the government. But I just want to make a plea to the president when he announces his cabinet that he doesn't include those people who are implicated in the State Capture Commission. That is, I think that is fundamental.
Right. Thank you so much for your comment, Dr. Ndoh. He mentioned corruption in government. I suppose that corruption is not something that we can see disappearing overnight.
The advantage of the government of national unity, in my view, is that those that are given responsibilities, either in the executive and also dealing with oversight, will be able to do so having the support of all political parties. At the same time, those that would be appointed to serve and who did not have that chance to serve in the past would get in with fresh energy in order to prove that they can actually do much better. But the most important advantage for me is that the net is wide open for the president now. He can appoint from within his party, the ANC. He can appoint from other political parties, and these people would be able to make a very strong team. But also at the same time, we should expect very healthy competition amongst ministers because each of them who will be there would want to ensure that his or a constituency is proud of the work that is actually happening under that person's portfolio. So I think we should expect a lot of hard work and at the same time, a lot of oversight and accountability.
Right, Dr. Ndoh, we have another caller on the line. This is John from KZN. John, good afternoon. What is your question or comment?
Yes, my comment is about this GNU. I see there will be no direction and there will be no fruitful result because many political parties have a different direction. So at the end, there will be conflict and no way forward. So I think there will be the problem. That will be the problem.
Thank you so much for your comment there this afternoon. Dr. Ndoh, I want to ask you about this government of national unity. He was also referring to it now. 9 parties today. By now, we have 9 parties. Do you think there could be a point where there are too many parties in this government of national unity, where the smaller ones would give you the impression of national unity, but where all the decisions must be approved by basically the ANC and the DA?
Well, I think we need to take some of these establishments on a positive note. The reason why you have got many political parties wanting to join could be a sign that South Africans are ready to rebuild South Africa. They are committed to serve South Africa, and they are also prepared and committed to work in the team. They don't want to work in isolation, but they want to ensure that they are part and parcel of every decision making, and they also want to make a change. Whether we like it or not, the ANC and the DA have got bigger portions of the electoral support. And of course, on the basis of proportionality, it will be fair for them to be given more responsibilities, because in any way, that is what the ordinary citizens on the ground requested them to do. But what I would also expect from the Government of National Unity is that smaller parties and those that are in and outside of the GNU should not be demotivated from exercising their responsibilities of ensuring that there is accountability on the part of those that are given membership in the executive. So Parliament has to work very strongly, but at the same time, you have got people who have got fears that because they've got differences as different political parties, they might find it difficult to work together. But as citizens, we have instructed them through our vote that they must find ways to find one another. They must develop programs for South Africa to move forward.
Right, Dr. Ndo, another caller on the line, Ezekiel in Gauteng. Good afternoon and thank you for joining us. What is your question or comment today?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you too. My question is regarding the IEC. My question is, when are we going to see the rules changes whereby when we voted and then there are discrepancies, but now the IEC will say, okay, we voted, it's done. When are we going to see this thing being changed whereby we look at the discrepancy and then we see how we can fix it? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndo. Interesting question. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think it's important to note that the IEC has the responsibility to run free, fair, and credible elections. And it's also important to note that when the IEC is executing its responsibilities, you have got other people that have to come in and observe how the elections are being run. And at the same time, the IEC has to conduct its business in a manner that everybody has to be satisfied. And there are different mechanisms of how the IEC has to deal with irregularities, to deal with people that are not satisfied with the work that has been done. And of course, when all such processes have actually been exercised or gone through, therefore the IEC has to move to the step of making a declarations to the elections. Of course, when you have got a situation where some people are not happy with how elections were conducted, there are many other avenues that they can explore in order for them to find recourse outside the actual work of the Electoral Commission.
Right, another caller on the line in Gauteng this afternoon, Crosby, joining us. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. What is your question or comment?
Yeah, look, I don't have a problem with the Government of National Unity. It's a good thing. It shows that our country is moving forward. But I've got an issue with, presently with the previous government, the regime, which is the ANC. We don't see the youth coming in to be parliamentarians. That is the main concern. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndo. Did you get that? Or you want to comment on that?
About young people?
Yes, yeah.
Well, I think it's important to note that we should be worried about young people who are not participating in the political activities. But at the same time, I think we need to blame ourselves and young people themselves in that their level of participation in politics is quite very limited. And I know there are many reasons why young people will not be participating, because they've got many other things that are busy doing right now. I have seen a circular of a number of young people who have become parliamentarians in this administration. And I think the number is growing, and I know that we might not be happy because it might not have reached the level that we expected it to reach. But I think it is also time that we go out, we participate in political socialization and mobilization through the different political parties and ensure that young people have to actively participate in politics. In other political parties, they will talk about the number of young people that they will expect to see in the different responsibilities in the party and also in government. And I know it might not be enough, but I think we need to put extra efforts in ensuring that young people have to actively participate in political activities.
Thank you so much for this very interesting conversation, Dr. Levi Ndo, the political analyst. This is Week in Review on the SABC News channel, and we will be back right after this. Welcome back. South Africa's rand edged lower early on Friday as investor focus remained on President Cyril Ramaphosa's imminent cabinet appointments under a new unity government. Now at 8:03 GMT, that's just more than 2 hours ago, the rand traded at 17 rand 99.5 against the dollar. That's 0.2% weaker than its previous close. Now, President Ramaphosa is expected to announce his cabinet in the coming days following consultations with the leaders of the Democratic Alliance and the Inkatha Freedom Party. We are joined now by the political economist, and his name is Dr. Dale McKinley. He joins us here this afternoon for Week in Review and our discussion about the rand. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good afternoon. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
So the domestic currency saw volatility around South Africa's elections and investors' uncertainty, but it strengthened recently towards that 18 rand against the dollar level. How should we understand this movement and what the market forces are telling us?
Well, I think it's fairly predictable. When we talk about the market, we're talking about stock exchanges, corporations, large multinationals, foreign investors, pension funds, people who basically are looking for policy stability. And what happened when the election results came was that they made it very clear. If you remember, Fitch credit rating came out fairly publicly and got criticized by saying, look, we think it would be much better for the ANC to go into a coalition with the DA. And the reason why is because they know the DA and the IFP in this case are much more market friendly. So when that happened, and when the GNU was constituted and the EFF and MK were pushed to the side, they reacted positively. And so what you saw was the currency strengthening. You saw the JSE having a record day. You saw debt and bond markets increase, basically improving. And you saw a lot of positive noises coming from the international investment community. So it is a fairly predictable response, I think, and one that I'm certainly quite happy to see that the GNU has gone in the direction it has.
So President Ramaphosa being sworn in for his second term gave the domestic currency a strengthening momentum. Was this a thumbs up, or in reality was it a case of the US dollar weakening? What is the numbers telling you?
No, look, the U.S., currencies are like yo-yos. Not just emerging market currencies like ours, but also, the thing is that these days, not only is politics unpredictable, the markets are unpredictable. You get massive swings going back and forth. So I don't think we can read, we shouldn't just react every single time it does this. I think what we're seeing now is a response to what has happened domestically, in the politics domestically, and a vote of confidence, so to speak, in some ways, to say, listen, don't go off and do different kinds of things. We want some kind of continuity. So I think in this case, seeing President Ramaphosa being able to continue as the president to a second term, seeing the DA come on board, it's too early to say where the policy is going to move. But I think most people would argue, and I would certainly be one of those, to say that there's probably not going to be a great deal of policy discontinuity. In other words, there's not going to be some radical measures being implemented, at least in the near term, and the markets are responding to that. So
you mentioned this earlier, investor sentiment was against that coalition that included the MK and EFF as a negative thing. But now that the latter seems to be out in the cold, the more of the other parties are coming on board. We have 9 at the latest count. The anxiety is only around who is going to get which position at this point. Is that a way of putting pressure on that decision by the president?
It's in some ways, look, all political parties are going to jockey. Everybody, whether it's the PA wanting the Department of Home Affairs to engage their own program, or whether it's the DA wanting service, public administration and obviously some of the security cluster. It's going to be a bargain. So yes, they're going to put pressure on President Ramaphosa. Yes, there's going to be some hard-nosed, no doubt, bargaining. And when you have a GNU and you have so many people at the table, it's a difficult thing to do. But it's one that has to be carried through. And so the ANC is going to, for the first time in 30 years, is going to have to bite the bullet and swallow its pride and put people in certain cases, probably in a lot of deputy ministerial positions as opposed to ministerial ones, but they're going to have to accommodate their GNU. And so whether or not I doubt they're going to give up the really, sort of say, crown jewels in terms of security and the economic cluster. But certainly on many of the other ministries, I think they're going to have to divvy them out according to keeping the GNU alive. Because if they don't, and the GNU then becomes unstable, well, then they've undone all the work that has been happening up until now.
So if the view is that the strength of this touted GNU is basically inclusivity, it follows that the economic policy proposal that is adopted must then reflect all of these different economic ideals. Is the market hedging their bets on the ANC and the DA dominance in this approach?
Sure, I think they when we say the market as if it's some homogenous entity in ways, and it's not. There are many different sectors within the market that have different kinds of interests and that are responding to different things. But generally speaking, I think what is expected, and I don't think it's just of the people who have capital and who want to invest, but I think domestically, what's expected is degrees of continuity. Where it's going to be interesting is what happens to the National Health Insurance Plan, for example, and how that gets rolled out. What's going to happen with relation to social grants and social welfare expenditure, and whether or not we're going to have a more expansionary fiscal policy as opposed to an austerity. And the so-called markets would prefer the austerity one because that's a global phenomenon that they quite like, because essentially, it doesn't increase the debt to GDP ratio. It doesn't get a lot of unpredictable kinds of policy formulation. So in some ways, they're going to continue to put pressure, and the ANC and Cyril Ramaphosa are going to have to steer, in some ways, a middle course. And I think their choice of a GNU is indicative of this middle ground choice. It's sort of center to the right in some ways, because if most of the parties are certainly not on the left side of the ideological spectrum. So I think what we could experience is degrees of different kinds of policies, but nothing fundamental will change in my estimation.
So can this 9-party pact now see South Africa's much needed economic recovery and reprieve, even with the constricted financial or fiscal condition the country finds itself in currently?
Look, I'm one of those that doesn't think that the present macroeconomic policy is going to solve our problems. I don't think that the ANC or the DA or the IFP, for that matter, are willing to really confront the reality, which is structural problems within our economy. We have structural unemployment. We have structural lack of growth. And the sort of conventional wisdom from the market is, well, you just stay the course and sooner or later private sector investment will deal with it. We'll have the trickle down. But neoliberalism, which has been dominant in terms of the form, has failed, not just in South Africa, but globally. So I think in some ways where the pressure is really going to come is if they continue this policy continuity and 2 years down the road, we still have the fundamental problems we have in our society and conflict begins to arise because people have been waiting to see if there's going to be a difference. I think there will be some degree of improvement in the short term, but in the long term, I think the ANC and the DA and this coalition that they put together, this GNU, are not really comfortable with moving in a direction which would necessarily mean some fairly radical, and not radical as in MK and EFF, but radical in the sense of more expansionary fiscal policies as opposed to this contractionary and keeping things close to the chest.
Let me ask you about inflation. Lastly, the cost of living. We saw inflation figures come out recently, quite unchanged actually. Is that as a result of austerity measures or of improved internal and external shocks?
I think it's predominantly the result of a monetary policy that's fairly constrictive. I mean, we've had the Reserve Bank basically keep the interest rates and the repo rate fairly high and constant for the last 2 years at record levels, and that's constraining expenditure. And certainly it's constraining consumer, investment in the sense of small-scale businesses making money that's growing in the economy. I'm one of those that argues that where we need to really concentrate is small and medium-scale businesses. We have a tendency in this country to concentrate on big things, big investments, big corporations, big projects. And those sound really good and they tick boxes, but they don't deliver a lot of growth, nor do they deliver a lot of job creation. So in the sense of inflation, where it's really going to need, it's not just headline inflation, it's food inflation, it's transport inflation, it's all of the inflation that hits the poor the hardest. That's where this government needs to really pay attention, because it can please the markets, but if it doesn't please the majority of South Africans, it's going to be in political trouble fairly soon.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon to talk about the economy and the rand. There's political economist Dr. Dale McKinley. Right. Now, some people in Limpopo say they are eager to see what the highly anticipated new national cabinet will look like. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to announce a newly constituted 7th administration cabinet under the Government of National Unity in due course.
The new cabinet is expected to bear some resemblance to the 1994 Government of National Unity. The then cabinet saw, among others, the last president of apartheid South Africa, F.W. de Klerk, occupying the position of the second deputy president. During his inauguration speech, President Ramaphosa emphasized that the results of this year's general elections expressed people's disapproval of how government performed. He also reiterated that voters gave leaders further opportunities to correct some wrongs. Some members of the public believe the synergy in the Government of National Unity cabinet will steer South Africa in the right direction.
I think we will see a better performing government because we will be having people from various political parties. The ANC will be held accountable. I foresee changes because ministers will be working for the public. We will not see them working for their comrades. I have never been hopeful. I think many problems will be solved this time.
For others, a fair mixture of experience and youthful vibrancy in the new cabinet will do the country a world of good.
It should not appoint too many young people. Young people are easily disrupted. We need to see ministers and deputies with experience.
The president must not bring back those old ministers. They can't be trusted. They will ruin the government.
Political analyst Enoch Maponya says the fact that markets have reacted positively after the swearing in of members of parliament last week signals a better future for the country. Although the economy remains volatile, the rand has gained some strength against several major global currencies over the last few days.
The economy is going to stabilize. In fact, since last Friday, when parliament was constituted, the value of the rand started stabilizing. So the appointment of cabinet will definitely strengthen the rand further. But on the other hand, we have got the challenge of the president having to include all the current 7 political parties that are in the Government of National Unity itself. It's not an easy task to constitute that cabinet. The DA has indicated that they've agreed with the ANC that 60% of cabinet members should be for the ANC, 30% for the DA, and 10% for the other parties. Now, say at the highest number, we have got, say there are 30 cabinet posts. It means the other 5 parties will be left with 3 cabinet posts, and how are they going to share those 5 cabinet posts? Because politics is a power game.
President Ramaphosa is believed to be still consulting stakeholders before composing the new cabinet. Rutando Bobori, SABC News in Polokwane.
Welcome back. Now, City Power and the City of Johannesburg have filed an appeal against the court decision ordering the utility to pay over 1 billion rand to Eskom. The ruling was handed by the High Court in Johannesburg on Thursday. Now, Eskom had approached the court on an urgent basis last month in a bid to recoup money owed to it since October last year. The court decision follows last week's announcement by City Power to implement load reduction in some areas to prevent a total system collapse.
The City of Johannesburg and City Power have noted the recent court judgment in favor of Eskom regarding the payment dispute between the two parties. The City and City Power believe that the critical aspects of the evidence were not fully considered by the court in reaching its conclusion. While we accept and respect the court's decision, the City reserves the right to basically appeal this ruling. It should be highlighted that despite City Power's efforts to engage in mediation and exhaust all intergovernmental relations dispute resolution processes to basically resolve this matter, Eskom decided to bypass these avenues and rushed to court to seek a resolution. It is equally crucial to highlight that Eskom currently owes City Power a substantial amount of 3.4 billion rands, underscoring the complexity of the dispute and the necessity for a comprehensive and fair resolution process. The legal teams have been briefed and appeal has been lodged.
Now, the energy sector says it's ready to work with the new cabinet ministers who will be appointed to lead this cluster. They want those tasked with steering the country's energy policy to maintain certainty and stability. Participants in the energy sector met in Pretoria for the city's inaugural Energy Summit held earlier this week.
The city of Tshwane gathered industry experts and role players in the energy space this week as the country ushers in a new administration to move South Africa forward. The country has made significant progress to overcome the rolling blackouts that have characterized the local economy for the past 15 years. The energy sector is the bedrock of the country's economy, and calls for policy certainty continue to grow louder going into the government of national unity.
What is important from a policy point of view is certainty and stability. That is very important, that what government is currently doing in terms of the policy framework, that there is no significant disruptions around that, because the investors and other players in this space are looking for that.
The country has legislation in place. Among those is the Renewable Energy Master Plan. The Energy Council believes the country must tap into a mixed bag of technology and energies in championing integration for the future.
We do have a mixed bag, a view of a mixed bag of technologies and the different forms of energy and the role that they can play jointly. I know that the new legislation will require the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to provide or produce an integrated energy plan. They currently produce an integrated resource plan which focuses very much on the provision of electricity. So in future we're going to see this integrated energy plan that looks at how all the different forms of energy can come in, the role they play.
The South African Independent Power Producers Association believes the formation of a multi-party governance presents an opportunity for collaboration. The body is also calling for policy certainty and is urging the President to speedily sign the Electricity Regulations Amendment Bill into law to accelerate energy security. The bill will allow for independent power producers to access the country's electricity grid.
The Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill has been passed by both Houses of Parliament. It's been sitting on the President's desk. There are certain things that should actually be implemented a little bit later, but it's about to be implemented, and that provides the legislative framework for the unbundling of Eskom, the creation of the National Transmission Company of South Africa, in electricity parlance, the TSO, the Transmission System Operator. That is the owner of the grid, the facilitator, the system operator, and the market.
There are also talks of the country building on its energy infrastructure with a future skills base in mind.
We also have, for instance, our South Africa Renewable Energy Master Plan, which is a very, very good document. It was very consultative, which talks to how we see South Africa progressing in terms of our renewable energy builds over the years and what we want to achieve. Things like jobs in the areas where we're going to decommission coal plants. So, for instance, in Mpumalanga is highlighted as a hotspot for job creation for young people particularly. So that's sitting in the SARM.
Energy experts believe this will be a tough balancing act as to who occupies what position, with expectations being that of a continuation in policy around energy and the economy.
So South Africa finds itself in uncharted territory, right? This is the first time where the policy will be decided by this government of national unity. One assumes that there will be some kind of a continuation, but of course when you have numerous parties coming on board, you then have to sacrifice certain experiences for, maybe what is more popular, and you need to balance what the economy wants versus what people want. Our economy literally relies on the electricity. And this is why we have seen such low to zero economic growth over the last decade, purely because the electricity is not there.
Municipalities like the city of Tshwane are also pushing for energy independence from Eskom, and they are hopeful that their efforts will align with plans of the Government of National Unity. All eyes are now on policymakers to lead the charge in securing the country's energy future, with role players in the energy space calling for investments in energy security and policies that will reform the energy sector, roll out infrastructure, strengthen the economy and create well-needed jobs. Katlego Logodi, SABC News in Pretoria.
Over 4,000 employers are behind with their pension fund contributions. And that's according to the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. It says as this is part of the employee remuneration package, it means that these employers are withholding what is owed to their employees and are violating the law.
The FSCA says over 4,178 South African employers are behind in making retirement fund contributions towards employees' retirement funds. Labour Federation COSATU says this is a criminal act and it's tantamount to theft of workers' money. Many of the perpetrators are in the security and cleaning sectors. Matthew Parks of COSATU says should a worker pass on or retire, this non-payment could leave their families in poverty, despite money having been deducted from their salaries but not being paid over to pension funds.
We have requested as COSATU for urgent engagements with the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, as well as Treasury and industry as well, including the pension funds at TUMID and NEDLAC, to make sure we can address this issue. And because these are criminal offences, the National Prosecuting Authority must get involved and it must simply prosecute these employers and confiscate their assets and ensure that the monies owed to these pension funds, which is workers' monies, are paid.
This comes ahead of the September 1st, 2024 date, where the two-pot retirement system allowing workers to access a portion of their retirement funds comes into effect.
The reforms will happen on the 1st of September. We are working closely at NEDLAC with Treasury and SARS and the FFCA and the pension funds to make sure it's a smooth implementation 1 September. Make sure that pension fund rules are amended to allow it. Make sure that there's sufficient liquidity at the disposal of the funds to assist these workers. And also to make sure the workers are fully aware of their rights, what they can and cannot do. And then of course this will be the first of many steps to reform our pension funds, to see how do we boost savings, how do we give workers more comfort during the course of their careers.
The FSCA has a list of the non-compliant companies on its website. The organization says it will be launching a campaign to educate members and the boards of trustees of retirement funds, as well as the public, about their rights and responsibilities regarding retirement fund contributions and the two-pot retirement system. Gloria Safakomusi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, Namibia's High Court has overturned 2 colonial-era laws that criminalized gay sex. The ruling is seen as a landmark victory for the country's LGBTQIA+ community.
Namibia's High Court on Friday overturned 2 colonial-era laws that criminalized gay sex, in a landmark victory for the country's LGBTQ community.
Today is really a momentous day for all
Namibians who love human rights.
Fidel Darsab, the activist who brought the case with the support of British-based non-governmental organization Human Dignity Trust, spoke to Reuters after the decision.
For me personally, it means that my life will never be a crime again. For the past 30 years, as a gay man, we've always been criminals on the run. Today, the court has declared this as unconstitutional, and it means that younger LGBT people, younger gay men can dream of having a life that is no longer a secret, a life that is not a crime.
Consensual same-sex activity is prohibited in more than half of 54 African countries, according to one international organization supporting LGBTQ rights. Namibia inherited the laws when it gained independence from South Africa in 1990. Those same-sex acts between men were initially criminalized under colonial rule. South Africa has since decriminalized gay sex. Omar Van Reenen, co-founder of the Namibia Equal Rights Movement, welcomed the court's judgment Friday.
The LGBTQ community are in need of a beacon of hope because we are living in a climate of fear from state-sanctioned homophobia and hate speech that have claimed the lives of 6 LGBTQ Namibians in the past year. So we need that beacon of hope and that message of love and unity and inclusivity from the court.
A law professor at the University of Namibia said the court's order can be appealed by the Namibian government within 21 days.
This hour, as South Africans wait with bated breath for President Cyril Ramaphosa to announce his new cabinet, more parties are joining the ANC-led Government of National Unity, and Rise Mzansi is the latest to join the GNU. The Electoral Court has issued out directives in the MK party's bid to invalidate the 2024 national and provincial elections.
It is rather disturbing, I think, to have someone who was impeached only in February of this year coming back to the same parliament that impeached him. And one wonders about the kinds of conflicts of interest that would arise in such cases.
And Parliament has been urged to revisit its membership rules and ethics carefully. And this comes as Dr. John Hlophe is set to lead the Umkhonto we Sizwe party in Parliament. Welcome back. This is Weekend Review on the SABC News channel, already in progress. Good afternoon from our Johannesburg studio, and thanks for staying with us. We continue with our review of some of the biggest stories of the week. I'm Gustav Freiling, and you can still share your comments or questions with us. You can give us a call on our number here in studio. It's 011 714 0680, 0681 or 0682. Now, Rise Mzansi is the most recent party to join the Government of National Unity. The party's National Leadership Collective last night took the decision to participate in the GNU, bringing the number of parties now to 9. The party says it has been consulting with various political parties over the last 2 weeks on how to best proceed in terms of power sharing and governance. Leader Songezo Zibi says that the party's manifesto and organizational principles align with the priorities and principles of the GNU Statement of Intent, which include upholding the Constitution, protecting the independence of key institutions, and ensuring service delivery.
Government is not just the executive, because many South Africans and political pundits tend to talk about the executive only. Parliament is governing. The quality of legislation matters. The quality of oversight in committees matters. And holding the executive and other public agencies to account is part of government. So our focus at this point is maybe 3 things. The first, to make sure that we uphold our constitutional values, because they are under threat at the moment. There are political organizations and other formations attitudes that are saying ditch the constitution and destroy institutions. That's number one. Number two, we campaigned on an agenda of making sure that some very basic issues that hardly get attention in politics do get that attention. We intend to raise the issues of hunger and food security. We intend to raise the issues of really critical lack of access to water, especially in rural communities. We also intend to raise the issue of the pandemic of drug abuse that is destroying the lives of young people. And finally, spatial justice and land justice and spatial planning, so that we don't have millions of South Africans having to become illegal occupants of land because the government and parliament fail to provide a framework for them to have land and to build a home and to build a life. So those are some of the things that we are going to contribute in a national dialogue and any structure that is working on similar issues.
Right, now the Electoral Court has issued out directives in the MK party's bid to invalidate the 2024 national and provincial elections. The specialist court has given respondents until this coming Tuesday to file responding affidavits, and in addition, the applicant, the MK party, will have until Thursday next week to file a replying affidavit. The court further noted that it has the right to dispose of this matter on the papers without referral to an oral hearing. Now, these directives come after the MK party filed papers earlier this month seeking an order declaring that the elections were not free and fair and therefore invalid. The party also seeks, among other things, an order from the court directing the president to call for a new national election to be held. In papers seen by SABC News, the party contends that had the elections been conducted in a free and fair manner, the MK party would in all likelihood have won the May polls. Now, Parliament needs to relook its rules as well as ethics more carefully. That's according to Professor Nania Bowler-Muller, Divisional Executive at the Human Sciences Research Council. And this as Dr. John Hlophe, who was impeached as the Western Cape Judge President, is the designated leader for the Umkhonto we Sizwe party in Parliament.
As far as we know, he hasn't got a criminal record. He's been impeached. And I don't think there are any rules about this. And also there's a precedent that's been set because our former public prosecutor was impeached by Parliament and then she became a member of Parliament for the EFF. So I think Parliament will have to look at its rules a little bit more carefully. Because besides laws and rules, you also have to look at ethics in public office. And it is rather disturbing, I think, to have someone who was impeached only in February of this year coming back to the same parliament that impeached him. And one wonders about the kinds of conflicts of interest that would arise in such cases. It certainly doesn't look good. I mean, if you think about it, in 2008, the reason why there was a complaint lodged against Judge Hlophe was that he was trying to influence the Constitutional Court to make a judgment in favor of the then Deputy President, Jacob Zuma. So you can already see that there's a connection there and that connection continues. So that controversy remains in our minds. And one wonders about, yes, trust, public trust in institutions. Our research has shown that over the last 20 years, trust in democracy and democratic institutions, including Parliament, has dropped substantially. The courts have held relatively firm, but at the same time, trust in the courts has dropped from 58% in 2004 to 31% now. So we have a bit of a crisis of trust in institutions. And when something like this happens, I mean, then people would look at it and go, well, what kind of people are representing us in these institutions?
Now, the ANC Women's League is not happy with the country having only 2 women premiers. League Secretary General Nokuthula Nqaba has called on President Cyril Ramaphosa to appoint more women as he mulls over the new executive of the 7th administration. Like the ANC Youth League, Nqaba wants to see more women represented in the provincial executive councils where the premiers are men.
The ANC's leagues have come out in defense of party and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa having the final say on who gets into cabinet. Youth League President Colin Malaji has denounced the government of national unity dictating who becomes a minister or deputy minister. The statement of intent of the GNU speaks of consensus of all members represented. But Malaji says it's the president's prerogative to decide on cabinet posts.
The ANC invited people into the government of national unity. Now, the president of the ANC still has the powers to decide who he wants where. Now, there's no discussion that is going to happen where other political parties who come into this government of national unity must make decisions for the president of the ANC. Now, those powers have not been given out. Those are the powers of the president of the ANC, who is the president of the country now. Now, on that one, obviously, we will be giving the president that responsibility to appoint.
The ANC Women's League has expressed its displeasure and disappointment on the premier appointments, with only 2 women making the cut. Secretary General Nokuthula Nqaba has appealed to Ramaphosa not to lower the number of women in the national executive.
In the process towards the appointment of the cabinet, which will be led by Comrade Ramaphosa, we are expecting an improvement, and we want to believe that the ANC has realized the mistake that has been committed, which maybe it was not deliberate, understand the pressure that they have to work under, but it can be also used that as an excuse not to improve. So we're expecting to see more women, not only in the ANC, but also influencing that approach of the GNU, which is now being used in governing the country, that those that have partnered with the ANC can also take pride in ensuring that women are being represented in numbers. And we are very clear, Samkelo, that being represented in numbers, it can't be only deputy ministers. We expect them to be afforded an opportunity to hold those key strategic positions as being the ministers, and there's nothing wrong to be deputized by our male counterparts because we work together with them. But that's the expectation moving forward. We were failed in provinces with the premier process, but we are hoping to see a difference when it comes to the composition of the ESCO in the provinces, that there's a principle, at least in the ANC, of 60 and 40%. 60 should be women, 40 male, where a premier is a male comrade.
The president is due to announce the members of the executive of the Government of National Unity this weekend after sufficient consultations with all political parties. Samkele Masego, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Welcome back. Now we're going to discuss the recent developments surrounding the Zimbabwean exemption permit. Now, the Department of Home Affairs has lost a crucial court case, leaving many questions unanswered. We invited the department to join us today, but unfortunately they declined, citing that they are still studying the court ruling. However, we are fortunate to have Dr. Vusimuzi Sibanda, an expert on the issue who has been following these developments closely. Dr. Sibanda, thank you so much for being with us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers, and thank you for inviting me.
So this court ruling has sparked widespread concern among Zimbabwean nationals living here in South Africa. Can you explain the implications of this ruling?
Well, look, I think for starters, it is a ruling that has been long awaited, and that we thought it was the only way that the court would rule, because the law was very clear, on the process, and the law applies. It's the law of general application that applies to each and every person and to every administrator who takes a decision. So at this particular stage, you've got all the ZTP holders quite excited, based on this particular judgment, because you must remember that one of the long-term objectives was basically to ensure that the ZTP holders, having resided in South Africa for over a decade, have duly qualified for permanent residence in terms of the definition of when somebody should apply for permanent residence, which is if a person is ordinarily resident in a country, and this period normally spans between 3 to 5 years, depending on countries. In South Africa, it's 5 years. So at this stage, it is very good news to the ZTP holders that are very hopeful that at least, this 2 and 4th that the minister and the department has been on, knowing very well that they did not follow the Constitution as well as the Immigration Act itself, because it is very clear about decisions that are taken when they're going to adversely affect the rights of a person in the process that must be followed, which had not been followed.
So can you tell us on a practical level what the potential consequences are for those affected?
Well, the potential consequences at this particular stage, especially of this particular judgment, is that number one, what the minister is likely to do if he continues to be the same, or even if he changes and somebody else comes in. You will remember that there was an Angolan dispensation, which after its termination over an elongated period of time, the Angolans were given the option to apply for permanent residence, which they did. So that also speaks to precedence, that there is precedence that under the circumstances somebody would have, or people that are concerned would have to be given, permanent residence. And then there is also the legitimate expectation, which is born out of the time frame that people have resided in the country. So what possibly the minister or the department can simply do is to say, those people that had been holding these ZTPs and that are still in good standing and have not committed any crimes that are specified, they can simply apply for permanent residence if they so wish, whilst those that do not wish to apply may, at the end of the permits, which have been extended up until 25 November 2025, or rather 29 November 2025, may then leave the country. So practically what is likely to happen is the minister may invite the affected people and civil society organizations to submit, their views or presentations as to the direction that might be taken if they intend not to practically, offer or extend the ZTPs or offer the permanent residence.
So the Department of Home Affairs has been criticized for its handling of this whole situation. What is your take on this?
Well, it is not without merit, the criticism, because the money that has been wasted, going to court, while the minister was very aware from the onset that he had not done due diligence, they had not consulted. The minister in January, I think it was on the 6th or the 3rd of January 2022, he then sent out letters to only start, informing the ZTP holders that they could make presentations. But that was, fait accompli, or that was already, the horses had bolted, because it was long after the decision had been taken. And when the minister knew that he had not done things in terms of the law or PAJA, he continued to go to court, wasting the taxpayers' money. He went to the High Court, he appealed, went to the Supreme Court, now he's been to the Constitutional Court, knowing very well that he had no leg to stand on. It's very unfortunate that these costs are paid, by the taxpayer, and they're not borne by the, the minister and the officials that are in charge of making those decisions. But it is something that is seriously regrettable.
So what options are available now to those Zimbabweans living here in South Africa?
Well, at this particular stage, the options that are available is that, all those Zimbabweans that are now in South Africa and they've got ZTPs, they, because they were given up to November this year to extend, those that did not apply to extend, they can therefore go forward now and extend, because the June deadline that the minister had been given by the High Court is likely to be waived by, the fact that the minister then extended to 2025, because the minister had been ordered to then do due diligence and make sure that he does the consultation before end of June this year. That was last year. So now, in order for all the ZTP holders to be safe, they need to then make an application so that they qualify for the extension, or at least, those that have got the waiver, according to the minister, can continue with the waiver. But this will then ensure that their stay continues to be legal in the country, and they also qualify, obviously, for any other, future changes that might take place lawfully.
So we did, as I said earlier, we did extend an invitation to the Department of Home Affairs to join us here today. They declined. What do you think that they should be doing now in this situation?
Well, I think what the department should basically do right now is to make sure that, as it stands, the department is going to be in a position to now, sit down and realize that their only option is to follow what has been ordered, by the High Court, which ideally means that the department needs, to invite all the various people, that are supposed to make comments in as far as, the ZTP holders are concerned. Now, what that means is they can publish that, or they can send them emails as they have always done, or at least, they can wait up until the end of the period and ordinarily, renew the ZTPs if they are so loath, to, give the permanent residence. But that is inevitable in the long run anyway.
Dr. Sibanda, we have a caller on the line. His name is John. He's from Gauteng. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here. What is your question or comment on this discussion?
Yes, sir. Oh, no, my comment is just simple. I see that South Africa has been trying to be kind to the Zimbabweans by making a special permit for them. But then it seems the minister has caused trouble for himself. So I think he must do away with those permits and never bring them back again.
Okay, thank you so much for your comment there. Now, Dr. Sibanda, I'm not sure if you want to respond to that.
Well, look, I think the general feeling of the electorate is very important. But I think at this particular stage, he could only be talking about what needs to happen in the future. That the government, when they take, these decisions, maybe they need to be, to be circumspect about what is likely to happen or the effects, in the long run. But you would agree with me that if you look at the Zimbabwe exemption permits, because a lot of people have been talking about unemployment, that it causes unemployment. If you look at the unemployment trends starting from 1992 up until about 2023, you'd actually notice that from 2009, the unemployment was relatively high in 2007 or so, but went down up in about 2009 up to 2014. It was really steady. So at the time when the ZEP came in, it did not really have a negative, impact on unemployment statistics. And in fact, I think a few jobs were created if you look at that particular trend. So it's unfortunate that politicians, and particularly the Minister of Home Affairs, invited this trouble on him because he created this by his own conduct and his own words, in that he started to attack the ZEP and not to even renew it and say it had negative effects on the on the unemployment rate when that was not backed by factual data. So what in fact that was an opportunistic, I think, way of trying to get a vote, maybe based on what had happened in the 2016 elections, local government elections. But there is no empirical evidence that ties that the ZEPs caused unemployment. And there's also the Lesotho exemption permits. So you would obviously realize that that information was not only misguided, but unfortunately it also caused a lot of people to start talking and to become aware, and then they were misled into believing that there was some truth into it. And now the minister has got to bear the brunt of that because he's wasted the taxpayers' money on it.
Dr. Sibanda, we have another caller on the line, and his name is Johnny. He's in Cape Town. Johnny, good afternoon. What is your question or comment this afternoon?
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for taking the call. I just want to know, these Zimbabwean nationals, will they have dual citizenship, or will they be given the option to forfeit or give up their Zimbabwean citizenship if they become citizens of South Africa?
Right,
Thanks.
thank you so much for that quite interesting question. Dr. Sibanda, what is the situation? Will they have dual citizenship?
Well, look, for starters, it's going to be an issue of permanent residence because, up until, they need to have held, the permanent residence for about, I think it's 10 years after their PR that they can apply for citizenship. But again, citizenship is going to be guided, by the Citizenship Act. Now, where the Citizenship Act does not allow for dual citizenship, then they may not have, dual citizenship. It means they'll have to, obviously renounce, either the South African citizenship or the Zimbabwean citizenship. But remember, no one is forced to have citizenship after a person has got permanent residence. A person could, perpetually continue, to hold his permanent residence without having to convert to become a citizen, which means that the right of citizens that include voting will not accrue to that person. But a permanent resident will retain the citizenship of his country or her country, except that they will, they will remain a permanent resident of South Africa.
Do you know how many Zimbabweans are in South Africa at the moment who are affected by this ruling?
Well, as of the last, ZEP, issuance, we're looking at about 178,000. But obviously, because we know that some people might have passed on and some people would have, migrated to other countries, especially during the period, of this up and down that was taking place. So the numbers are likely to be far much less. Maybe now we could be talking about 150,000 or so. And of course, some are likely to have, to have fallen down because if there are those that might have committed crimes, that will not allow them to apply. So those numbers might be definitely lower than the last count, which was 178,000.
Dr. Sibanda, we have another caller on the line, and his name is Vusi. He's in the Eastern Cape. Vusi, good afternoon. What is your question?
Good afternoon, man. I want to put my input on the comment on the TV.
Yes, please.
Yeah, man. I don't know why the Zimbabwean people are so fully confident that they belong in South Africa. They've got their own land. They must go and improve their own land. They will stay away from our affairs. You know how our country looks like now? Our country is tattered now because of these people. You know, South Africa is really tattered because of them. There are millions here. Why do they run away from their country? It's their country. They've got freedom from a long time ago. Those people, they're coming to make a mess of it, and they enforce that their wishes to South Africa.
Okay.
They don't belong. They don't belong here. They belong in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. We heard your point. Thank you so much for your call this afternoon. Dr. Sibanda, you heard that. That's the sentiment that we're hearing from our callers here this afternoon, that there is a feeling like that in South Africa.
Well, of course, indeed, there is that feeling. I mean, we know that people like, Dudula and, some people from the Patriotic Alliance, have always had this feeling that, migrants and quite a few, or a number, particularly Zimbabweans, should go back to their country and, fix the in that country. But obviously that is, a statement that, no one, can be stopped from feeling the way they want to feel. But we should all know that, migration as a concept is something that is worldwide. We've got South Africans that are not in South Africa. The numbers may differ, but it must be noticed that as long as people are in a particular country lawfully and in terms of the law, surely, no one should, be seen to be attacking, that right to have, to migrate either for pastures or because people are running away from, our political instability.
Doctor, thank you so much for speaking to us this afternoon. Interesting conversation. Dr. Vusimusi Sibanda talking to us about those exemption permits. This is Week in Review on the SABC News Channel. We will be back right after this. Welcome back. Now, Democratic Alliance MP Ronaldo Gous has been immediately suspended from all party activities and will face disciplinary charges for an inflammatory video which shows him using racially charged language. The party says it has established that the video is genuine and not fake, as initially suspected. Now, Gous is the former Nelson Mandela Bay councillor who has been in the spotlight since he became an MP. His case has been referred to the party's Federal Legal Commission. This is where he will be able to state his defence. It's not the first time Gous has been involved in a video material in which he uses foul language. Another video of him making offensive remarks in 2009 also made the rounds across social media. Now, DA leader John Steenhuisen previously defended Gous by attributing his past comments to youthful indiscretion. This is when Gous said the video dated back to when he was young and still a student. Now, while he said he regretted the tone he used to then, Gous dismissed claims that he was racist. He's been removed from his duties with immediate effect. So you're watching Week in Review here on the SABC News Channel. We are supposed to speak to Kenny Kunene of the Patriotic Alliance about this story, and we hope that he is with us now and that we can talk to him. We were struggling a little bit to get hold of him, and we're trying to get hold of Kenny Kunene about this whole story around the racial relationships in South Africa, but also specifically this issue around Ronaldo Gous and this video that he made many years ago, and that he was inaugurated as an MP for the DA on Friday. There he was during the inauguration, and that is when all this video came out. So we're going to try and speak to Kenny Kunene, but in the meantime, we're going to continue with this story. Another case of a bogus doctor has been reported by the Department of Health in Gauteng. A female imposter was captured at the Tembisa Hospital east of Johannesburg. The bogus doctor spent a night in detention after she was turned over to the police. Department of Health spokesperson Motsalatale Modiba says the hospital has filed a case at Rabosuto police station in Tembisa, and the suspect is due in court soon. Now, Modiba says unqualified individuals posing as medical professionals put innocent lives at risk.
The suspect, who was apprehended on Tuesday night for impersonating a doctor at the Tembisa Provincial Tertiary Hospital, is expected to appear before the Tembisa Magistrates Court sometime later today. According to the information that we have from the police, the apprehension of the suspect once again sends a strong message that people that are trying to impersonate healthcare professionals will be, the law will have to take its course in terms of ensuring that they suffer the full consequences of this, because there could be dire consequences where people impersonate healthcare professionals and therefore maybe offer advice to the public, advice of which could be harmful to the public. We are grateful for obviously the response, the way in which our staff was able to obviously pick up that this person is not one of the staff members, and therefore ensure that the police are able to be brought in to apprehend this particular suspect.
Right, so the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has set aside former public protector advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane's bid to have her successor held in contempt of court and sentenced to 15 months imprisonment. Now, this comes after the court heard an interlocutory application brought by the public protector advocate Koleka on Wednesday, which asked the court to set aside the new cause of action Mkhwebane introduced through an amended notice of motion in her main gratuity case. Counsel on behalf of Koleka contended that it was an irregular step which merely sought to punish and harass the public protector. The court found, among other things, that the amended notice of motion was an irregular step and non-compliant with the uniform rules of court. Mkhwebane was also ordered to pay the costs of the application, including the costs to counsel. Right, now for more on the Democratic Alliance MP Ronaldo Gous, we are joined by the Patriotic Alliance Deputy President Kenny Kunene this afternoon. Kenny, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us today. I want to ask you about this situation, this video, this old video. South Africans are known for being optimistic about overcoming those historical racial divisions, promoting social cohesion, especially after these elections, showing the politicians that they want a government that works together, now in the government of national unity. What is your comment on this matter? And does this one member's past utterances influence the DA's position now in the government?
Thank you very much for having us, and good afternoon to your viewers. I must say that it did not come as a surprise when we saw the video. The DA has been consistent in saying that their veto process is very much intact, and they're able to detect people who are not desirable to hold office. But I know that the DA is a party that protects racists. What Gous did, or who Gous is an epitome of what the DA is about. He epitomizes exactly what the DA is about. They knew about these videos, they knew who Gous were, and they rewarded him with a parliamentary seat. You would have seen that in one of the videos. She is defending Helen Zille. She is protecting Helen Zille. She is saying racist things in defense of Helen Zille. And Helen Zille rewarded her with a parliamentary seat. Fortunately, this came to the public domain. The DA, as we have said at local government, why we could not work with the DA is because the Federal Council of the DA is a bunch of white supremacists with racist tendencies, superiority complex, who believe that black people are nothing but inferior. And look at the statement of the DA when they decided to join the government of national unity. They are saying they are joining to save South Africa. To save South Africa from who? From black parties, from black people. So they are saying they, as a white supremacist party, they are the only ones who can save South Africa, because if black parties come together to run this country, it will go to ruin. That statement itself has got racist undertones. So racism is in the DNA of the Democratic Alliance, or the racist alliance. Okay,
we don't have the Democratic Alliance here this afternoon to respond to you, so I'm going to take it off the focus of the DA for the moment. I want to ask you about coloured people, one of South Africa's minority populations, sitting at 8.2%. In your view, how does coloured people feeling aggrieved or feeling left behind influence people turning to race-based minority politics?
Again, this was a creation of the white monopoly capital, and which has now transformed into the DA, the Nationalist Party, in 1994. You would remember that during apartheid, race was just in two. It was whites and blacks. Blacks included colored people and Indian people and black people. But in 1994, we were then divided legally so, constitutionally so, and categorized now as black, white, Indian, and colored. And the reason the National Party negotiators wanted it that way is because they realized that going into democracy with the apartheid race divisions, they are going to be the only minority. So they had to create the Indian people as a minority, to create the colored people as a minority, so that they can then push their narrative that the Indian people and the colored people must work with them to protect their minority rights. Yet during apartheid, they categorized, they racially divided South Africans between white and black. So it was a doing of the Nationalist Party that became the DA. And that is why in the Western Cape, the narrative of the DA throughout the campaigns for elections and its indoctrination of the majority of the people in the Western Cape has been black people from Eastern Cape are coming to take your jobs. So stand with us so that we can your job. So the DA has been racially dividing black people and colored people deliberately. But also that does not end there. The ANC also is part of this because the ANC endorsed that racial division, which found itself in the Constitution. It then found expression in the Constitution. And the ANC and the EFF, also in their own constitutions and manifestos, continues to divide black people and colored people. They classify colored people as blacks and not African. And then you ask yourself, which continent do colored people belong to? So colored people are Africans. They were born in Africa. Some of them, their fathers are black. Their mothers were colored or white. And therefore, you can't say they are not Africans. So colored people are Africans. So the ANC, the EFF, and the DA has been at the center of trying to categorize colored people as not belonging to Africa, but also as a minority, when they are actually part of the majority.
Okay, let's take the focus off the political parties and now look at the government. The government itself, the administration, the 7th administration is going to be a government of national unity. What would you say need to be done there in order to achieve a more stable peace between all these racial groups? Should this government have specific measures, specific programs, for instance?
Yes, in this government of local unity, I don't really take the de Klerk Foundation seriously, but I think their statement this week that the PA has to be part of the GNU so that there can be a voice for colored people around the political table. That is appreciated, but the PA is not just about colored people. The PA is about patriots. The PA is an alliance of people who love South Africa, be it colored, Indian, white, or black. However, they have captured it right that we are the only political party that has brought the plight of colored people, the issues of colored people onto the political agenda, around the political table in this country. Since 1994, there hasn't been a political party at the national level especially that has sought to bring the issues, the struggles, the plight of colored people around the political table. All parties were mainly concerned with the black issues, the white issues, the Indian issues, and now the PA is saying, let us not exclude the colored people around the political table, let us also bring them. And in this coalition, that's what we are going to talk to. You would remember that there's an equity law that excludes colored people in the workplace. And I've experienced this in the city of Johannesburg as the MMC of Roads and Transport, where I have fought against an advert for an employment excluding colored people yet including white people.
Yes.
So in the government of local unity, we have to bring South Africans together. The government of national unity, we have to bring South Africans together, bring the issues of all races in South Africa around the political table so that we can find a lasting solution and stop excluding the colored people from that particular national question.
On that note, thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. Kenny Kunene is the Patriotic Alliance Deputy President. This is Week in Review on the SABC News Channel. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Freedom Front Plus leader Pieter Groenewald says the ANC has accepted their condition to recognise Orania. The Freedom Front Plus wants the Afrikaner-only enclave to be constitutionally recognised. Groenewald says this was one of its preconditions to negotiations with the ANC in joining the government of national unity. Now, Orania is described as an Afrikaner nationalist town and is situated in the Northern Cape province. It is located along the Orange River. Earlier this week, ANC Secretary-General Fikile Mbalula categorically denied that recognising the status of Orania was a precondition in their negotiations with the FF+.
A couple of weeks ago, we had discussions with the national level of the ANC, and I explicitly asked about the Northern Cape and whether they have the authority to accept or not. And it was said to us that yes, they do have the authority to accept or not, and they did accept.
What did they accept? Just for clarity for our viewers, what exactly did they accept that was your condition?
The agreement that we've put forward in the Northern Cape was accept, and that agreement states, for instance, that all the documents and, for instance, court cases, they re-emphasize the fact that they recognize those actions taken to recognize the status of Orania.
Right, so let's continue our conversation on race relations matters this afternoon. I'm now joined by Joost Strydom, who is the spokesperson of the Orania movement in the Northern Cape. He joins us to speak about the political developments in that province, where negotiations between the ANC and the Freedom Front Plus included a requirement that the governing party must recognise Orania. Joost, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. What a privilege to participate, and thank you for the opportunity. It's always good to speak on matters such as these, which is in the light of good cooperation and the way forward for communities such as ourselves.
So what is your comment then about this concession by the ANC to recognise Orania? Would it change anything on a practical level?
On a practical level, Orania has been a reality for 33 years. Orania has been established in the year 1991. Although the idea of Orania is much older than that. So in practical terms, this memorandum of understanding is a practical layout of things that's been a reality for a long time. So yes, there is recognition for Orania, but already in the Accord on Afrikaner Self-Determination and later in the Waldi Musa Declaration, where he stated in the Mandela era Parliament that it's a legitimate pursuit to have for Afrikaners to pursue communities such as Orania. And then finally, the court case of 2000, where Orania's municipal status was cleared up to a large extent. So this agreement follows all that. In practical terms, it is a confirmation of things that's been real for a very long time, and it has been real because it's brick and mortar realities and realities that's been created in the past 33 years on the basis of good relationships.
I'm sure this must have boosted your confidence. Are there any immediate future plans that this agreement will enable you to do?
Immediately, as I said, we are going to continue as we've been continuing. And the reason for that is this is not something that happened in a vacuum. This is something that is the product of having good relationships with our neighbors, good relationships with other communities, and a good understanding with government. Orania tries to liaise with government on all three levels, clearly communicating what we are doing and what our strategy is, not only to the governing party itself, but also to other role players, as you know full well, that visits Orania from other political spheres as well. So in the short term, let me just say this, Orania will continue doing what it has done for the past 33 years, and that's to create economic realities here, to create cultural realities here, to create a place for our people to build, to have good service delivery, and obviously to continue with the fact that we have good relations with surrounding municipalities and other entities.
Okay, Joost, we have a caller on the line and his name is Temba, is in Mpumalanga. Temba, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. What is your question or your comment on our discussion this afternoon?
My comment is so simple. I want to know what is it that is not recognized about Orania, because Orania is in South Africa. South Africa is a country. And if this Freedom Front want us to recognize Orania, it shows clearly that these white people are no more prepared to be with us collectively as black people or black community. The democracy of South Africa was acknowledged in 1994.
Okay.
And if they want Orania to be recognized now, for what good reason? Because those people are staying there, nobody is giving them a problem. Nobody's attacking them. Why they want to have a special recognition within this country? Because this country has to come together as black and white together as one uniformed country. So if they need a special recognition, for what good reason?
Temba, thank you so much for your call this afternoon. Temba from Mpumalanga. Joost, I'm going to ask you that question. Why is it necessary to recognize Orania now?
So that's an important question. It's a question that we get a lot. And I think one of the important aspects to refer to is, in the broader South Africa, the term unity and diversity is used a lot. What we want is a right to live our diversity. In this specific agreement, we refer to the fact that we as Afrikaners have a specific language, a language that originated here in Africa, that's a product of 400 years of being on this continent as well. We have a shared history, a shared religion, and we want recognition for our culture and what it is, not only as individualists, but as a group of people. And I think the best ways that this is showcased is Orania's relationships with other cultural communities that have that pursue similar goals. Thinking of the Xhosa community in Nyameni in the Eastern Cape. So Orania focuses its resources on itself. We need our resources to develop here on our place, but we do share some of our ideas. Our cooperative banking system, for example, some of our lessons that we learned in local governance, to have good service delivery to our people, good basic services, those things, those ideas we share. And in that is cultural recognition, and we've actually made a lot of progress in those terms because of the fact that other cultural communities understand and recognize us as Afrikaners, as a group, a cultural group, and they respect us for that. And then respect given is also respect received, and then there's mutual understanding.
Joost, we have another caller on the line, and it is Simon in Limpopo. Simon, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. What is your question or comment today?
Yes. Good afternoon. I just want to know what is that the people from Orania want to share with the South Africans? They want to live alone outside South Africa, or they want to have their own state? That is what I want to know.
Simon, thank you so much. Thank you for that call. And Joost, I'm going to ask you that. Do you want to be part of South Africa? Do you want to have your own state?
What we want to have is a place for Afrikaners, a home for Afrikaners. Afrikaners feels in a lot of senses, including a lot of the laws that's made by the South African government based on things like excluding minorities out of economic positions, government positions, education institutions, and so on. We want to build a home for Afrikaners. and that might take different forms. But we are freedom-oriented people. And we think that our model for a good South Africa, the way forward, is a community of communities. That is a term that we use a lot, a community of communities. In that, we see progress on this continent and in this country, where different cultural communities respect one another, liaise with one another, interact economically with one another. And in that, there's a recipe for success, rather than centralizing everything, especially things like political control, so centralized. It didn't work on the previous governments. It's not working under the current government in terms of centralization. So we want an approach where Afrikaners can make decisions for themselves, and from that, liaise and cooperate with other people.
Joost, thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. Joost Strydom is the spokesperson for the Orania movement, and that's where we come to the end of today's show. Join us again tomorrow for the week ahead. From myself and the team here at SABC News, take care.